Hey folks, Segasonicfan here, making a quick lo-fi video with this phone that's not as good as my usual one. On the Sega CD, the Model 1 Sega CD, which has its share of issues, mostly related to the drive mechanism when you can't eject. Now obviously if you need to replace a laser, that's a different story. But in my case, this laser actually works fine. Um, there's lots of videos online for repairing these, but I wasn't able to find one that really gave a nice overview of what's going on with the mechanisms, which are the common failure points, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, let me just tell you a little bit about this, a little overview. Let me first see if I can put this on my bench for slightly better light here. Um, my bench is a huge mess right now, but let's see, get all the parts over here too. All right, sorry for the usual shaky camera here. These videos are free, and I don't have any sort of fundraising going on, so they're very low quality. But the information is there, and hopefully that's why you've tuned in to fix things. So, if you're trying to replace the laser, that's not too hard. There is a get better light over here. Actually, I still need more light. Let there be light. If you go over here and you look at this thing, this is actually the same in Model 2s and Sega Saturns as well, this little cool mechanism. You bend those out just slightly. Don't forget, this is all old plastic. You bend that out just slightly, and that metal rod will actually pull out through that opening. And that's how you remove the laser here. It's only notched a tiny bit there, so you just need to pull it out just a little bit, and it should work. And then, of course, you're going to have a spring tension against this gear driving, and then you got to unplug the ribbon cable, of course, here. The ribbon cable has a white release plastic there, and over here it's got also white release plastic, those little tiny notches you got to pull up first. If you aren't familiar with those, definitely try working on something else first, because those are in everything. And then you should be able to take the laser out. I don't think you need to take this frame off, but that is a possibility. So that's the first thing. Second thing is the switches. Now the switches are really important because the way that electronics with mechanics in them, especially old ones, know that the things are aligned a certain way and things have moved in one position versus another is via switches. Now nowadays they'll use magnetic Hall effect switches and all kinds of fanciness, optics and stuff, but this sucker uses analog physical switches, just like like an old CD player lid or something like that. And so that makes it a little bit unique. Now if you look down in here, it's the same switches you'll find in all the Sega Saturns for their CD lids. There's a clear plastic, and I'm trying to get some more light in there, but it's kind of tricky. Zoom in there too. That's the switch right there. So it's clear plastic over two pieces of copper. And when it gets bent back a little bit, see how I can bend it like that? Then it shorts, because there's two pieces of like bendable copper in there essentially. It's real simple stuff, and the reason the plastic's there is to keep the copper contacts from getting into contact with dust and other contaminants. And so that one is for excuse me, for letting the system know when the laser is lined up with the spindle when it's all the way forward. So if you have a unit like this one was, where you just hear the CD tray closes and seems to close all right, but then you hear like a clicking, click, 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 like that kind of a sound, and you see this like trying to move over and over again, it's because that switch most likely is not working. Ideally, I guess you would remove the switch, try to clean it, see what's going on. But I've had a lot of success, I gotta say, with just going in there and bending it forward just a little bit. Because if you're thinking about this, this is, it's perpendicular like that, and it's getting bent back like that. over 20 plus years. So by giving it just a good nudge forward, you can bend the copper into a place where it's going to have a lot more life out of it. In a more ideal world, we have like a complete switch replacement, or you dissect the whole thing and clean it. Definitely feel free to do that. But I've had really good results just bending those switches just a little bit forward, like that. So that's the first switch. The other switches are over here for the right there. There's one there and one there, and those are for well, I'll explain in a second. So the one that's there, and you can test these, by the way, on the bottom of the board. You can kind of tell by their footprint, the two plastic tabs and then 2 points in the middle. That's how you can tell there's the CD laser one, basically, CD drive switch. And then over here, this one is for the lowering and releasing of the CD drive, and that one is for the ejecting tray. That's for the tray detect. So how this works is this guy turns, and it's all driven. Usually the larger gears, they're always driven by a small motor with a small gear shaft. And in this case, it's this little dude over here. So this guy turns this belt, which I'll talk about in a little bit. That belt turns this guy, which turns this gear, which turns this big gear, which both raises and lowers this, and moves our tray, because our tray has teeth under here on both sides, actually, even though I think only one of the sides is used. So these teeth will push out and pull back in the tray. Now, oh, there's also a teeth down here. So if I can get in there, this also has some plastic. Yeah, I think it's too hard to get in there to see the switch. I don't know if I can zoom in real close. So that, if you can make that out, is the switch that I was pointing out from the bottom of the board earlier. Let me get a pair of tweezers in there to point at it. So that right there is the switch. Not the Nintendo Switch. Different kind of switch. And when this gear turns all the way, I guess this would be clockwise, and you see how the tray is fully at height now. Then it'll hit that switch, which tells it, okay, you don't need to do anything else with the tray now. Ready to read a disc. Now, if I move this, I have any luck doing this. So I guess it's, yeah, if I move, see how that little piece goes back now, and this starts to lower. It's lowering just a little bit, just a smidge. If I continue to lower it, see how it's going lower, and then that switch is no longer engaged. Now, that's from me turning this clockwise. So now if I turn this counterclockwise, the lid rises, or I'm sorry, this CD portion rises, and the switch is enabled. So that's how it knows, okay, this is full height or it's not. Very important. Again, if you hear like a clicking sound and a motor like trying to do something and it's not having any luck, that's another thing worth investigating. Finally, if you have a CD tray that is ejected all the way, but it keeps trying to eject it, that's going to be your last switch, which is going to be, that one's a lot easier to get to. That's this guy right here. I feel like this guy probably fails the least, but hard to say. And that gets pushed back. That lets it know, okay, the CD tray is all the way out. How does it know? How is it? What is it? What piece of plastic pushes that back? Well, that's actually kind of interesting. It's not a built-in piece to the tray. And the more I look at this tray, the more I think it was probably a design borrowed from something else that Sega upgraded or changed for the Sega CD at the time. But this piece of plastic, it slots in this hole here, and then it gets clipped in by that clip right there. So if you push that clip a little bit to the left, this will come out. And that post, that plastic post, is, when it's clipped in there, is what's going to knock that switch and let it know that the CD tray is all the way out. So those are your 3 switches. There's only 3, fortunately, but it is kind of a lot. So if one of them fails, it might be hard to figure out exactly which one. But you can do a continuity test with a multimeter and just, very gently use your finger, or, move the thing in question and see if it's, if it's activating when it's supposed to. One thing I want to thank, God, I wish this YouTube user at me something. Gosh, I'm gonna try to put in the description. But there's a YouTube user, a person that made videos on YouTube that I appreciate very much, who made videos of the Sega CD Model 1 that were actually, they made a video that was actually quite helpful. And that was to show how to actually remove this tray entirely, because that was bugging me. And normally in my experience with 90s CD players, there's like tabs in the back or on the side that, with the tray itself. I couldn't find those. It's really bugging me. Turns out the tabs that hold the tray in to remove it completely are here, this guy, and this guy. You want to be very gentle with those. Again, we're talking about 20, 30-year-old plastic here. And so when this is all the way forward, you nudge one of them a little bit, then this comes out a little bit, and then the other one, and then you kind of work its way out. It's not too hard. You just want to be gentle. Whenever you're working on a CD drive, though, it's crucial to be able to take the tray out to be able to work on it. So I was kind of stuck on this without knowing how to do that, and had to humble myself and go look it up. No harm or shame in looking things up. I know some engineers sometimes like to have big egos and feel like they're better than everybody else, or they just feel like embarrassed, But there's nothing wrong. It doesn't matter how advanced you are, you're going to forget stuff. You're going to have trouble finding a certain thing or need to ask questions. And the smartest people I find are the people that ask the most questions. As Tupac said, even the geniuses asking questions. So the last thing here is this belt here is a common issue. Again, that was shown in this video, which I will try to link in my description here. Always read my descriptions, folks. I always put a lot of information. Sometimes I'll put information that's not in the videos, and I don't edit my videos. So if I want to add text of any kind, it'll just go in the description. But yeah, this is this belt apparently wears out, and I think that was actually the case with my unit. It's a pretty easy thing to test. You just turn this little guy here, and if nothing's happening with these other gears, then you know that your belt is a problem. This belt is apparently pretty hard to source. You have to find like old retailers of VHS drive belts. It's kind of weird. I think the model, which again I'll put in the description, this guy found was called I'm gonna butcher this. I think it's SBC 3.0. 3.0 is 3 inches. It's the length of the belt. But I don't know much about these, so I will refer to that video in the description. The best thing to do, of course, is to replace the belt with an exact one if you can find it. I looked, they actually linked in that video, and they had been discontinued. I did a little bit more searching and couldn't find any. I might search some more later, but for now, I came up with a pretty simple repair, and that is you take this belt off and clean thoroughly both these gear in the inside joint with alcohol, with isopropyl alcohol, and then use the dry end of a Q-tip to clean it all off. That's the first thing, because you want to make sure there's no grease in there. And the problem, of course, is that there's not enough friction on the belt. So the belt is just staying stationary while this is turning. So we want to create some friction. Well, what's a good way to do that? I just used a nice, real sharp X-Acto knife, and very carefully I cut notches into the belt, about halfway in, all around the inside of the belt. And first step before that, I actually flipped the belt inside out as well. So I gave it a fresh side of the belt that hadn't been rubbed against all these years. And then I put some notches in it. And so far, as you can see, there's no problem turning stuff. The only problem is that it's on a table and it needs to lower, But so far, so good. I actually think this might be a permanent solution, which is kind of amazing. As you can see, it's turning everything just fine. It's a bit of a hack. I'm not going to defend it as like a professional way to do it. I would like to get a replacement. But if I can't find a replacement, you got to resort to other means, folks. So yeah, I'm confident this is going to be working now. I got that belt in. I fixed one of the switches. I double checked one of them. I'm gonna double check the other one. Really make sure those switches are in good working order. I'm gonna put the whole thing back together, and then with anything mechanical, you want to test the crap out of it. So I'm gonna be ejecting this disk tray like 20 times and loading 10 different games, and really going to put it through the paces, because last thing I want is to sell this to somebody down the road and them to be like, oh, it ejected a game the first 3 times or whatever. You really want to put it through its paces with anything mechanical. Also, feel free to put some grease on it. I've been using some silicone grease. I'm not sure it's the best, to be honest, but this stuff I put a little bit on the gears. And if you got any recommendations for some good grease for this kind of stuff, I'd love to hear from you. And or anything else that you want to add to these repairs. A lot of these are being repaired nowadays because they're getting expensive, and people are starting to see that there were some good Sega CD games, I guess. And they're, whatever other reasons, old plastic and stuff. People have to take care of these things if we want them to stay around. And that's it for this video. Again, I apologize for the shaky camera. I don't have like a great AV setup right now, great video recording setup. Kudos to the great people that do and have all the fancy lighting and everything, but I'm just trying to get the knowledge out there. So hopefully this video was useful for you, and if you're interested in checking out any of my board designs and stuff, you can find a link to my website on my About page. I design PCBs and do repairs for Sega consoles. This is Segasonicfan signing out.